Let's do it.
Here we go. From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. We got a great show today, and hopefully we've got some new listeners. So I'm Nick, that's Jim, and that's Jacob. Jacob, say something. That's enough. All right, and now broadcasting from the Churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Well, hello, friends. As you are hearing this episode on wonderful Cinco de Mayo, that means that we are doing our annual Reddit AMA. Ask me anything. And so this is always... AMA. Oh, big time. So we're super excited to welcome all of you who are finding our podcast for the first time. This is like our third or fourth annual AMA, and so be following that thread over.
I like that you don't know.
No clue.
Yeah.
Not a clue. We've been doing it for so long.
It might be 8.
I remember the first time we did it, it just was this like, oh, this will be fun. And it blew up. It went to the front page and we're like, oh, people like talking about mental health. And then we started doing it as an annual thing. It's kind of the only thing that we do to really promote the show. And it's a great way to just get people talking about mental health for Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we are super glad that all of you who found us on Reddit today are following along. Make sure that you stay stuck to that thread because we don't stop until the questions stop. So you will find our answers.
So if you asked a question,
it's getting answered.
It's coming.
It's coming, no matter what. So be sure to follow that thread and welcome to the show. We hope that you enjoy it with us today. Later in the show, after we answer some questions, we are going to have a wonderful guest. We have got the great podcaster, magician, performer, Brian Brushwood joining us from Great Night and from Modern Rogue and from World's Greatest Con.
From everything.
Dude's just doing it all. He's from the internet.
He's from the internet.
You've seen him on the internet. But awesome guy, and we have a great discussion, and he goes deep with us. He tells us about his own family history with mental health, talks about his own journey into therapy and what took him there, and even makes a little bit of news, sharing a little bit about his own journey. So awesome stuff, and we've got that ahead of us. But first, we're going to jump into some awesome questions that we've got from real listeners. If you'd like to drop questions into our inbox, you can send them to us directly at podtherapyguys@gmail.com, or you can submit them anonymously. Just go down to our website, podtherapy.net, and there's a little box. Has instructions. You can send that to us. And don't forget, you can also just get a hold of us on social media, Pod Therapy Guys at Twitter, Pod Therapy Guys on Instagram, and Pod Therapy on Facebook.
Oh, and you haven't said this in a while, but if you want to do an anonymous email and you don't want to deal with all the other stuff and taking out a burner email or whatever, just put at the top of the email, I want to be anonymous.
Yeah. Yep. Just use a fake email address whenever you drop it in. Or you mean if they're emailing?
I'm saying if they don't want to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Then you can easily just write at the top of it, I want to be anonymous, and the guys will respect that.
Yep. Easy peasy. Not a hard thing for us to do at all.
Yep.
First question, dating a man 3 times my age. Hi there, guys. My question is about a relationship I've been in for just over 2 years now. In February of 2020, I ended a relationship with my first serious significant other. It really emotionally wrecked me, even though I believe it was a good choice. Within a few weeks, I met a new guy. Initially, neither of us were romantically interested in each other. We just really enjoyed talking. One day I asked if he'd like to get dinner just to continue our conversations. I think partially I was drawn to him after this other breakup because he really made me feel seen. We got dinner, and after that, we couldn't get enough of each other. It took less than a week for us to realize the chemistry and connection that we had on physical, mental, and emotional levels. He's an amazing person. Funny, emotionally intelligent, consistent, loving, social, affectionate. We kept seeing each other and became intimate. Here's the catch. He is more than 3 times my age. I am in my early 20s. I know, it's crazy. Believe me, we're well aware. We've talked about it based on my interests, perspectives, etc. I act like I'm in my early 30s, and he certainly doesn't look or act like an old guy. When we met, I assumed early 60s, which doesn't make this any less weird. Within a month of our first date, I moved away due to COVID hitting and briefly tried to break it off because the relationship felt unsustainable to me due to the age difference. Honestly, I couldn't break it off. We'd already fallen for each other at this point. He asked that we just take it one day at a time, and we have. I've never met someone who I've connected with so well, and I don't know what we would have done without each other over these last 2 years. Since then, we've been doing long distance. I come and stay with him for long weekends every 1 or 2 weeks. We also call multiple times a day and text throughout the day. I've done long distance before, and it was miserable, but in many ways, this has been a breeze. Also, this is probably TMI, but we have an amazing sex life. My big fears are that, 1, my family and friends won't approve. There are many reasons to suggest they won't. My family found out that I'm in a secret relationship, but don't know any of the details. I haven't told anyone in my life about it. I used to have a very tight-knit community of friends, but we've pulled away somewhat, and this relationship is one reason for that. I'm very sad about this. Number 2, I'm afraid that this relationship doesn't fit with the life I've wanted for my future. I really want to have kids, and we've talked about how we'd love to have kids together if it were at all an option, but it's obviously so impractical. Oh, did I mention he has kids who are older than me from a previous marriage? Yeah, there's that. If it wasn't for the age difference, we would have moved in together a year ago at least, even likely gotten married. I can't imagine my life without him, but also the idea of watching him physically decline over the next 20 or 30 years scares the shit out of me. He's in amazing shape for his age, but he actually recently had an atrial fibrillation, and it upset me so much. We've talked about all this together. He's the most supportive person in my life, and if I told him I just can't do this anymore, he wouldn't fight me on it. However, if it was up to him, he'd rather just say, "Fuck the world," and get married. I'm not at that point yet. Also, for the record, he's not some rich or famous guy, just average.
Well, my advice has changed now.
He's not some rich or famous guy, just average. And neither of us are taking advantage of each other. We're just two fools who fell in love, I guess. I'm a big fan of therapy, and I'm working on finding a therapist right now. I guess my question for you guys is, what would you do in this situation? I'm so tired of holding this secret, especially about a relationship that in every other way is fantastic. Curious on your take on this, and maybe you can reframe the situation to give me some insight. Also, if nothing else, just sending you guys this letter is a big step, and it feels good to get it out to somebody. Love the show. I've been listening for about 6 months, and it's easily my favorite podcast. I wish I'd written in sooner. I always thought I hated trivia questions, but after listening to Jim trying to figure out geography, I've never loved trivia more. Oh, thanks. Well, thanks, guys. Anonymous. Pronouns are she and her.
Okay. So.
Man, a lot going on in that one.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So she's in her 20s, right? Like,
Yep.
That's how I read it.
Early 20s.
And then
she's 3 times older.
She's
more
three
than
times
3
younger.
times older.
No, the boyfriend's 3 times older.
Or yes,
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah,
meant.
yeah.
Okay,
That's sorry, I misspoke.
I'm assuming he's late 60s,
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
around 70 is my guess there.
Well, if she's 22, he's 66, right?
But she said more than 3 times.
Okay, so let's say, late 60s.
Yeah, I'm guessing pushing 70. I'm
Close,
guessing
knocking on
70-ish.
70. All right. Wow.
Yeah, I don't do math,
Yeah.
but
No.
that seems to check out.
Categorically, I have no
Yeah.
clue what any of this has to do with anything. So.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 big fears. I kind of wanted to start with that. So 2 big fears. Number 1 is kind of the family and friends are not going to approve. So other people's approval of the situation.
Right.
Okay. I just want to kind of put that on the back burner for right now because I
Right.
think that pales in. I think number 2 is kind of the bigger issue, which is that the relationship doesn't fit with the life that she wants in the future.
Good point. Yeah.
So I think that because the first one, whatever, you can work around that. You can, people, this happens all the time. People are in love with people who family members don't approve of.
Right.
Not that big of a deal. I think the second one.
That happened to
is-
Laura's girlfriend.
It did.
Or Nick's girlfriend,
Of course.
rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
Her family hates Nick.
A story
Yes,
of disapproval.
Yes. It's been fine, though.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, they'll warm up.
They'll
to
come
me.
around.
They'll warm up to
Yeah.
me. We're only in year 5.
Yeah.
Like,
Just
get
getting
around.
started,
It's-
really.
You're an acquired taste.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking,
I'm
too.
only 4 times older than she is.
That's right.
But I think okay, so number 2, I think, is the bigger thing. How does this fit in my future life? And the question that I would ask you, writer, and this I'm not trying to lead you in one direction or the other, but you asked some really good questions and you had some really good insight there as far as like I pictured myself having children. I pictured all these other things. When I am 40, he's going to be, I don't know, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Years old.
Plus 20, so 90.
Is that
I think that's how math works. I think it works in a straight line once you have a
Right.
number.
Yeah.
It's you're doing great though. Keep going.
Okay, yeah.
You're on the right track.
My point is,
Yeah, no,
my
you're
point
fine.
in
You're fine.
all of
Go on.
this
Don't worry about the numbers
is
thing.
the question I would ask you: do you see your struggles with that question getting easier to answer over time, or more difficult to answer over time?
Yeah. I think you're on the right track. To the first question writer, this problem of like, man, I'm keeping this secret. My family knows I'm in a secret relationship. I used to be close with friends, and I'm afraid to bring this out. Of course, there's a part of me that wants to be that hopeless romantic that's like, yeah, society be damned. Like, you're in love. Like, just wear it out there, girl. That's fine. But like, we also live in the real world where there's going to be opinions. Now, you don't have to care about those opinions, and you're allowed to have, to say, okay, thank you for your feedback. But also, it's true in life that sometimes you have stakeholders. Sometimes you have humans that matter to you, whose opinions matter, and they are going to say the obvious thing, which is your second point. And I think that's all you have to really worry about. If you reveal the first thing, I'm afraid to tell people about this relationship, the worst they're going to say is everything that you said in the second point. They're going to say, hey, don't you want to have kids though? Is this going to work? And they're going to bring up the obvious logistical thing.
Is he taking advantage of you?
Yes, there's going to be this piece of like, hey, and they're going to ask, and close people in your life are going to
advantage of him.
They're going to ask those questions. They're going to say, hey, what's the deal? And they might say things like, hey, do you mind if I ask, like, what was your relationship like with your father? Like things like that. This is all going to get discussed. I think that's going to be natural. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody this truth. However, I appreciate the complexity that you're feeling where it's like, man, I don't like having this secret because I'm in love and it's a good thing and I'm tired of acting like I'm ashamed of it. And I miss my friends and family and I'm in a relationship. I want feedback all the time. I want to talk to people and share about my life. And I get that. So I don't love that the writer feels unsafe to do that. I really would encourage the writer to, I like you're going to talk to a therapist about it first, but I think I would want you, it's been over a year, I'd want you to start kind of imbuing that trust in maybe just one person. You started with us, which I appreciate, but I'd want you to maybe take that first step just with somebody in your life, just to kind of get that first reaction. And yeah, they're going to react with a little bit of, shock. That doesn't necessarily mean outright, furious criticism. It could just be, oh, you caught me off guard. Just like you caught the podcast off guard. We read that and we go, oh, okay.
Also, it's something that you've been keeping a secret.
Right.
You haven't been keeping this a secret from us. So
Right.
you're not getting any of that part of this reaction from us.
Not at all.
Did you say how long the relationship has been going on?
It's been over a year because
Yeah.
they've been distanced for about a year. So it's been a minute. They've been together.
Your close friends that don't know about this, they're going to be surprised and probably hurt that you've kept this from them.
Yeah, and
At
I think
least some
they're
of them
gonna.
are.
I think they're gonna want to demonstrate that they're listening to you. I think they're gonna take a position of curiosity.
Yeah.
But you might have somebody in your life that is very toxic, and this will reveal that. And
Right.
okay, well, apparently they're gonna, all not pass the friend test, and then some of them you're gonna just say, hey, I'm sorry I brought this up. Feel free to not talk to me about this, and you move on from it.
And I think what will happen, hopefully, is that the people who really care about you, their concerns are going to be the same, like Jim said, are going to be the same concerns that you yourself have verbalized.
Yes.
But I think it's really nice though sometimes to actually hear that from a friend.
Right.
Like I'm thinking all of this in my head, but I'm not saying anything about it. But then hearing my friend ask me this question and me have to try to defend it
Right.
or explain it, it kind of puts you in a position where it's kind of that cognitive dissonance, like
Right.
where you kind of hear yourself saying something that you don't really believe, and it forces you to really evaluate that.
Yes.
So I think having that conversation with a close friend is a great idea.
This question reminds me of a scenario that I think can show up in multiple contexts. The age thing really just fundamentally comes down to biology. That's really, and she points it out. She's like, hey, on every other level, it's great. We're compatible. I love him. Biologically, he is going to decline at some point, and the next 20 years of his life look very different than the next 20 years of my life. There's a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, old one. It was called Love and Other Drugs. And in it, he's a pharma rep, and he's kind of the suave, charmy guy. And he finally falls in love with somebody, and it turns out this woman has a pretty significant illness. And he's, just stricken by the fact that he loves her. It's the first woman he's ever really loved. And he starts going to like her support groups and trying to be there for her and help her navigate the illness. And he goes to a support group, And there's a point when she's in the support group and he's in the hallway and he's sitting there drinking some coffee, and another man comes over who's the partner of another woman in the group. And the man sits next to him, and he's an older guy. He's about 20 years this guy's senior. And Jake Gyllenhaal looks at him and he goes, "Do you have any advice for, what it was like to live with somebody going through this and how you got through it? And what advice do you have?" And the guy looks at him and he says, "Date a healthy girl, man. Don't do this. Don't fall in love with her. Don't stay. You don't want to do this." And I appreciated the complexity of the movie because they really gave permission for Jake Gyllenhaal's character to wrestle with all of this and to not just trivialize it down to Disney romance of like, no, love shall prevail and they'll find a cure and everything will be good. No, you see the defeat in this elder man's eyes and you see him saying, "Young man, go live your life. I know that this feels like the one, but this biological reality is going to become something that changes everything about your future, whether you can have kids, what you're going to do, that you're going to travel the world and all these other things. And your entire youth is going to be spent caring for this other person's end days. And that's going to break your heart and devastate you." So I found that movie very profound. And I guess it relates this idea, whether you're talking about age or whether you're talking about health, this is a real reality that many people wrestle with.
I have wrestled with this. I've never even told you this.
Nick just pointed at a bear.
I
said that he's wrestled with it.
Yes.
It's weird that bear was
This
here
bear
the whole time.
right here.
I know.
Right.
And you have not told us about
irresponsible.
this.
I just feel like that shouldn't be here.
The first person I dated after my divorce, similar thing, no age difference, but serious health issues. And she wasn't exactly honest with me right away.
Okay.
It's like, okay, well,
About the health issues.
yes.
Okay.
Sure.
And was, very much like, okay, well, I told you that this happened, but it didn't happen.
It's happening.
It's happening. And then that was one issue. I won't go into it. And then there was a couple of other things.
Right.
And then it was really me having a conversation with a friend of mine that, and he was very supportive. He was like, "Look, you're not making any big commitment right now.
Right.
If you just want to wade through this and see how it goes, you can do that. You're not committed to anything.
Right.
You can walk away at any point." But it was in that conversation explaining it where I kind of had that realization of like, this makes no sense. Absolutely no sense right now, because things are not going to get easier. Things are just going to get more and more complicated as we go. And then it was a decision that's like, okay, I can't do that.
Right.
Which I shouldn't have been dating anyway, because I wasn't even in a good spot at that time,
Which is aside from the point.
Well, but it also kind of fits with this too.
Yeah.
She met him
after a breakup.
like
This
2
is
weeks
good
2 weeks after a
point.
breakup.
Yeah. No, this
Yes.
is where I was
So-
about to go. Was
Good point.
straight to
Yeah.
that too.
And so, I mean, that you have to consider that too. Yet, not just forget about the age difference. Just, have you gotten over the last relationship too? Because
The worst relationships that I have had in my life, the worst romantic relationships I've had in my life, were with people that either myself or my partner was on the rebound from someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we tried, and this may not be applicable to this situation.
Yeah.
But in those situations, we tried to make that relationship more than it was, and they turned into the worst relationships in my life.
Yep.
Definitely a lot of room here for this part you brought up, Anonymous, about going to therapy. And that's, I think, where all three of us are kind of converging, is that you've got some soul searching to do. Now, listen, I'm a hopeless romantic. I really am. And so I'm default usually the guy.
He still thinks this podcast is going to be successful.
It's going to be. I believe deep down in my soul.
Out of the three of us, I believe I can say with surety, speaking for the other two, Jim is the most romantic out of the three of us.
Easily. Running circles around these chumps. So, no, my default answer is like, oh, no, like, be authentic. Like, this is, you have a genuine connection. Just enjoy these
First, you got to figure out what authentic is, though.
Right, and that's exactly the real point here, is that your values are part of your authentic truth, and they get to have a vote too. And one of the things I always encourage people when they're making big decisions, I always tell them, let every version of you, past, present, and future, vote on this issue. Let all of you vote on it. And that includes you in 20 years. That includes you who may have the child complexities. That may include you who has a child with this man and then, down the road needs to have that child not have a father, that could exist in their life at some point. So
I won't be accused of naysaying.
Right.
That future you could say it was worth it.
It was worth it. That could happen.
Yep.
That absolutely could happen.
But that future you does need a vote.
You got to explore that in therapy. So, Anonymous, I'm so glad you're writing in about it. I'm glad you're talking about this with us. We're honored to be the first people that you've confided in about this.
I thought that the audio just dropped out there.
I know.
But no, it was Jim burping.
No. It was my heart caught in my throat because I'm so emotional.
Is that what that sounds like?
Yeah, or
it sounds
indigestion.
a lot like a burp.
I like indigestion, too. That bacon sandwich for dinner really got to me. I'm all verklempt. All right. Well, thank you, Anonymous. A great question for the show. And thank you for listening. Thank you for contributing. And let us know what you decide. We always love to get follow-ups and find out how the story plays out. Everybody, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about being in an unhealthy marriage. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode.
It's a marriage where you get fed bacon sandwiches for dinner.
So good.
Physically unhealthy.
So good.
Today's episode is brought to you by Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Carolyn Albert, Kevin Chamberlain, Ben Stanley, Byler T, and University Jeff. And if you would like to become a Theraproducer and sponsor the show, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. All right, our trivia questions this week. Thank you to Felicia Butler.
Oh, no. Are these the AP
These
ones?
are the ones.
Oh, damn.
Oh, shucky ducky.
These are
There we
AP
go.
mental health class questions.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
So these Jim should get all of them.
So these are from
and
high
I
school.
should get none of them.
These are high
theory.
school psychology.
I get to play along on this.
Oh, you don't know? You don't have
I
the
do.
answers?
I don't.
Oh, good.
All right, so these are high school
So
psychology.
we'll guess and we'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know what the answer
We'll
is.
figure it out one day.
But Felicia Butler sent these in. So, hey guys, per request, here are some questions from Unit 8 Clinical Psychology Test that I give my students. I've highlighted the answers in black. You should have Jacob answer first, LOL. All right.
You will be disappointed, Felicia. You'll bet you he has even odds.
Yeah, he does. Pretty sure he does.
Are they multiple choice?
Yes.
Oh, he definitely has even odds.
All right.
It's not even close.
And they're case studies.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh,
we're ready.
interesting.
James makes a lot of money by lying to people in order to get them to invest in his company. James believes he is important and immune to prosecution, and he does not care about the people he takes money from. These characteristics are most associated with which of the following personality
Oh,
disorders?
Lord. Here we go.
Is it A, dependent, B, narcissistic, C, histrionic, D, schizotypal, and E, obsessive compulsive?
Oh, Lord.
Oh.
All right, Jacob gets to go
Well,
first.
I've heard of 3 of those 5. So already,
In the last presidential election.
Yep, I'm feeling good about knowing 3 of the 5, or having heard 3 of the 5 terms before.
Yeah. It's
All right,
come
so
up.
it was dependent,
Narcissistic,
histrionic,
histrionic,
something that I haven't heard of,
schizotypal,
something else I haven't heard of.
and obsessive compulsive.
I mean, I feel like narcissistic is the red herring. I feel like that's the one that what's the writer's name?
Felicia.
I feel like the authors of Felicia's textbook
Okay.
want me to pick that answer.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like they're fucking with me.
Almost certainly.
Yeah. So I am going to go with, what was D?
D is schizotypal.
I'm going with that one.
Okay.
Okay.
This is probably where we should introduce Jacob to all the new audience members. Jacob
fine.
is
You've just been life coach. Yeah.
Did it actually play?
It played.
Okay, cool.
I forgot to unmute that channel to you guys' ears.
Jacob is a life coach. Jacob is a professional audio engineer for Las Vegas shows, and he's been doing our show for a long time. And we have anointed him a life coach because fuck
Why
him.
not?
You don't
Yeah.
need qualifications to be a life coach.
Nope. And he has more than most.
My qualifications are I can run audio for shows and I'm a comedian. End of qualifications.
And he is accepting debit, credit, and check.
Yep.
All right, so you're
However,
going...
by this time next year, I will also have the qualification
Oh,
of
here
being
we go.
Las Vegas's
best.
#1 therapist.
It wouldn't be the first time I've been snubbed. All right, so he's going narcissistic.
No.
No, he's schizotypal.
He went
I went that one.
schizotypical.
I went with one that I've never heard of before.
Always a safe bet. Do you want to go next, or do you want me to go
I'll
next?
go next. I'm going to go narcissistic.
Yeah, it's narcissistic.
Oh, okay.
Hey, your instincts were right.
I mean, that's what I'm.
It was so obvious that it was right.
That's my real guess on this.
Yeah, I was worried that they were going to throw in antisocial into the list, and then it was going to be a toss-up.
Oh, 89% of students got this question correct nationally.
Okay, wow.
Okay.
Good
And
job.
it was all
America?
narcissistic?
It is narcissistic.
All right, all right.
It is
Oh, good. I
narcissistic.
feel good about that then.
Yeah, that you fell into the 11% who didn't get it.
No, I feel like if that was a real test question,
That your
I would have
instinct
had to
wasn't
have picked the thing that I would have that I actually thought it was.
The red, yeah,
Yes.
you would have been right.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is correct.
Because
Good
I
question.
I admittedly picked one that I didn't know the definition of.
Man, I'm really excited for
Yeah,
this.
see,
unit.
anybody can do this.
Yeah,
I
this is
love
great.
this.
All right, I'm feeling good about this test. I'm feeling good about question number 2 coming
Yeah.
up.
You've got a good idea for this. You got a good
And now
eye.
I know that the author of the textbook isn't just fucking with
No.
me.
I think she's literally just posting the questions
Yeah.
right from the textbook. God, this is fun. I'm so excited to get to do this whole unit. All right, next question. Am I in an unhealthy marriage? From Anonymous. My husband and I are falling apart. I've lost all attraction and love for him. It happened gradually. Here's a bullet list of all the things that he does. 1, he's a shit father. Only thing he does is somewhat provide for us. I buy groceries on my credit card and have to beg for his money to pay it off. He has a gaming addiction. Whenever I try to explain that he should spend time with us before we go to bed and play afterwards, 7 to 8 p.m., and he gets home around 4 to 5, he never does. Constantly on his phone with his not safe for work friends from Twitter. Whenever he does spend time with us or we have serious conversations, he's still on the phone. He argues that I'm being dumb for getting upset with him for being on his phone. He doesn't hang or do anything with his son. Refuses to feed him or put him down as he makes excuses such as he will just want you. Or when he does hang, he will do it for only a couple of minutes, then put him down to be on his phone as he gives him to me while the baby cries. He has had multiple emotional affairs in the past, especially while I was pregnant. I gave up trying to stop him as he argues that it's not cheating. He always plays the victim when I'm upset or when I try talking to him. We don't have sex anymore because I told him I don't want sex to be the only time that he gives me attention. He gets frustrated and pissed, then becomes the victim and tries to pressure me into it. Whenever we are close to divorce or separation or anything, he threatens to harm or kill himself. Or jokes, "Don't be surprised if you don't see me tomorrow." He uses my past mistakes as excuses. When I was pregnant, I was neglected and pushed aside as he talked to other women and I felt worthless. He didn't help me whatsoever, nor with our son's room, etc. I was extremely depressed, and one day a man came into my life that I happened to meet through a friend, and he took advantage of that, and that man assaulted me. Now my husband likes to use that against me as a reason for his mistakes. He spends hundreds of dollars on strangers to get their attention and nudes. He wants an open relationship now so that he can have 2 subs, but I can't have another male because he's the only one allowed to dom me. Whenever we did have sex in the past, I always felt used. He never did anything for me, but only him, no aftercare. He will get angry whenever I tell him I don't want to have sex while my son is nursing or if the baby's crying. He'd rather screw me than tend to his own son. He'd rather put him in the crib screaming and crying so that he can use my body. He gets aggressive. He will punch other objects, never me or our son. He doesn't have any photos of our son or me on his social media, which I know is a red flag, and I've asked him to post photos of us, but he said that he doesn't like using social media much, so why? The only time he takes photos of our son is to brag about how good a dad he is toward others. He lost his wedding ring. He claims he lost it at home, but I know it was at a bar. There's probably more, but at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted. I want a divorce, but I'm scared of him taking my son. How am I supposed to share him when he's never put him down for a nap, refuses to bottle feed him, puts him in a stroller so that he can game while, quote, watching the baby, gets angry and yells, "Why won't you stop crying?" Like, stop at him. Oh, okay, yeah, like he'll yell and cuss the baby. I know he's manipulative and narcissistic, but can you tell me this is unhealthy and beyond repairable? Woohoo! Thanks, Anonymous.
I gotta tell you, Anonymous,
Damn!
a large part of my job on this show is to make jokes, and usually it's some part or some fashion about the questions that come in.
Yeah.
You make it really difficult.
Yeah, boy, you got to thread that needle.
I just want you to know how difficult it's going to be to make jokes about your question.
You got to stick the landing on this one? Oh, my gosh. It takes some gymnastics. Damn, that's a hard question, man.
Should I go first?
Go for it.
A lot of hard questions.
Good luck.
All right. Here, I want to preface what I'm gonna. Well, no, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I only have a preface, so I guess that's just a statement.
All right. I think you just stumbled upon an answer.
Everyone has something to say.
Hear ye. Here's my concern. And I'm gonna say this, and I don't want you to be offended by what I'm gonna say, but I'm just gonna be real about this, which is that the question that you're asking for us is kind of loaded in a way. It's almost kind of and I see what you want is you want validation. But I don't want to just come out and say, yeah, this guy's a piece of shit.
Right.
And you can play this audio for him and tell him I said that.
Yeah.
Because we have to appreciate the fact that we have you writing in a list of your grievances and we have nothing about him. Right. Nothing about, and I'm not saying that I don't want you to take that as in like, well, here's another man who wants to hear from the man and will believe the man over the woman. That's not where I'm coming from.
I mean, that's what I hear you saying, but go on. You're doing great.
You're an asshole.
Hate mail, get it in.
It's just the fact that we have to understand that obviously everybody has a bias.
Right.
Everyone has a perception.
Sure.
There's no way around that. We all have that.
We speak through our hurt.
Exactly. And so if everything you're saying,
it'd be weird if you didn't have any kind of bias.
Yeah,
right.
Certainly.
We expect that. Everything you're saying in here, it's serious. It's really serious, and it sounds awful.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just kind of ask. It sounds like your mind is made up. You said I want a divorce. So really, your question here is
but you're scared of it.
Yeah. I mean, you're worried that he's going to take your son.
Understandable.
Absolutely. I would be too. And I think, with that, I would advise you to consult an attorney to answer. We can't speak to the legal part of that.
Yeah.
But I can validate your fear. I can say that, again, assuming all of this is 100% spot on accurate, because I've got nothing else to go off of, I would be scared in that situation too.
No.
So,
and I want to expand on Nick real quick, just saying that we're only hearing your side of it and everything else. I think part of the reason Nick is saying that is speaking of biases, we are going to be naturally biased to believe every word that you're telling us.
Right.
We are on your side. We want to be on your side. We want everything that you're telling us to be correct. So part of what Nick is doing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is kind of pointing out what our bias is as well.
Yeah.
So we want you to take everything that we're saying now along with that kind of a bit of a grain of salt as well, in that we're biased in your favor.
I think, and I mean, everybody who writes in, we have to operate from the perspective that the information we're getting is accurate.
Yes.
Right. Otherwise, everything we're doing is pointless.
Of
right.
course.
So
it might be anyway.
Touche. But I mean,
I can't make jokes about our questions, so I'm making jokes about us.
But that being said, the thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to get cornered into coming out and making a statement without having all the information.
Yeah. So, writer,
I know it's late in the game to now draw that line.
Yeah. Way to
After
take
we've
the
been
hard
doing
stance.
This for 3 years.
Yeah. 4 or 5. We've been doing this 5 years.
Shit. Yeah.
We're in the 200s now, buddy. Yeah.
He didn't say we hadn't been doing it for more than 3 years.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for at least 3 years.
This is season 5. Yeah. So we're halfway through. So, writer, a couple of things. So, okay. You have intentionally compiled a list, I think, to give us a highlight reel of shame, right? And so it achieved the goal, right? I think your goal was to shock us. I think your goal was that we'd read that and go, holy smokes.
We don't like the picture you've drawn of your husband.
This guy doesn't sound like a great guy. And, I don't like it. So I guess I have a couple of thoughts about that. First off, I generally assume that when people have been in a relationship for a while, they have some known baked in qualities that some of this list might shock me or your mother, but that list doesn't always shock you. That there's parts of this that you look at and go, oh, well, this is like well known and like we have talked about this, but then if I cast it this way, it has a shock value to somebody else. I'm not saying you're being deceptive. I'm just saying I'll bet some of this kind of seems like you already knew that about this person, and there's parts of this that actually reflect some of the dynamics in the relationship. I don't know your case, but as you're describing it, it makes me think of a couple of things. First, every relationship gets brought to a straining point with the newborn child phenomenon. I mean, you don't give us a lot of clues here, but I'm taking it at face value that it seems like this is your first child. It doesn't seem like he has acquired his father role at this time. It seems like both of you have talked about having an open relationship. You mentioned that you would like to have another man, but he doesn't like that idea. He wants to have other women and have subs. So apparently you guys have a pretty big sexual history. You seem to be talking about that in here. And now it seems to be kind of turning into these other dimensions now that there's a child and there's different kind of chemistry. He wants more sex with you, but at the same time, he's like not finding his fatherly role. That's a turnoff for you. There's just so much here that seems to come back to the dynamic of a child being new in you guys' world. And I guess as a therapist, if the two of you had come into my office with this and you had said, is it hopeless? Do you think that we're just going to end up splitting up? Well, of course I would say no, don't believe that. This is new. You guys have never done this before. This guy's never been a father before, I assume. And we need to start working on becoming new people because your world has changed. Whatever your cool life was prior to having a kid that allowed for this level of like, whatever relational freedoms that you guys seem to be enjoying, that all needs to transform. And so my first track on this kind of thing would be, how can we start sitting down, doing everything differently? We've got to become lovers who are parents. We have to talk about how we unify as a family. There is a gelling that needs to happen. And I'm not trying to defend the man in this scenario, but I do think it's important to observe that many, many men struggle with that first initial becoming of a father. It's very strange to them. They don't always immediately bond with the infant. The infant wants the mom and nurses from the mom and is close to the mom. And sometimes the dad doesn't organically bond. And it takes a while before they feel like they're even part of the family in this new dynamic. Not making excuses for the guy. He definitely seems to have a lot of toxic behaviors, a lot of selfishness, a lot of manipulation. He lacks those paternal qualities. He doesn't seem like a nurturer. He seems very self-interested. And he seems pretty deceptive and like he's going to go out and try to find his own life. I really hope that the two of you can sit down in a couples counseling context and start observing these things and discussing these things and working these things. Remember, writer, that the therapist that you go see isn't in the business of calling balls and strikes. They're not a judge. They're not a referee. They're not going to point an icy finger at him or at you and say one of you's in fault and one of you's wrong. They're going to take a constructive solution-focused approach. Their job is to try to help this family overcome this new set of circumstances and ultimately be successful.
Now, I could say, because the question is, at the very end, is this unhealthy and is it beyond repair? Well, I say unhealthy is, at this point, not as important as is it problematic. I think that's the bigger issue.
Yeah.
And obviously it is because you've defined it as such.
Yeah.
And I think the second question, is it beyond repair? And this is just my philosophy on it. Other people may have different philosophies or beliefs on it, but I think a relationship's repairability is not based off of events that have happened, but amount of effort that the couple wants to put into it.
Good point.
So, the same event could happen for two different couples. And if one couple is willing to put in 45% and the other couple is willing to put in 100%, then you're going to have two different answers to, is this beyond repair? It's
always repairable if you're willing to lean in.
That's exactly something I was going to point out about what Jim was saying earlier about, it sounded like the dad doesn't have those paternal instincts.
Right.
I think the bigger problem, especially for the writer, or at least that's how I'm hearing it, is that the dad isn't trying to have those paternal instincts or to develop them or to just kind of do what the writer sees as dad's part.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you bring up a good point, writer, which is once there's a child, and, as a show, we like to always deal with your reality. And your reality is I may lose custody of my child. There may be a 50-50 split, or there might be something about this that scares me that's inconvenient. And that's a real reality. I've had lots of mothers who have said, I want a divorce, but I won't do one because I don't trust this man to have the nurturing skills to care for this infant whenever they're in custody of them. And therefore, I'm not going to throw the dice right now. I'm going to try to figure this out, or I'm going to sit here and deal with it. And that's a very hard position to be in. And I've been the therapist that they've talked to before, which is why I'm encouraging you to get into therapy, either for yourself to work through the coping skills and make the choices that you need to make, or if you can, for the family, getting both of you guys in there, maybe just to become better co-parents. Maybe you look at it and say, Jim, there's not a drop of this relationship that I still want. That's fine. But it would be great if you guys could at least bring that relationship to an end, getting some co-parenting skills, if that's possible at all, developing some kind of friendship factor, at least having that to stand on. But a huge letter, Anonymous, and a tough one.
And I'll tell you, as someone, my parents were divorced when I was a young kid, and those two parents not liking each other and continuing to parent together, that's a big deal for the kid.
Yeah.
It's a big fucking deal.
Yep.
You mean it was worse because they didn't like each other, but they stuck together, or that it was actually better?
No, they didn't stick together. My parents did not stick together.
I see.
But I'm saying, from my own experience, from my friends, experience of my friends who are parents and are divorced and have children from their previous marriages and everything, it is a big deal for your kiddo that the two of you are at least able to work together in that co-parenting.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah.
The co-parenting is the valuable
I'm
thing.
tailing on to what you're just saying.
Copy.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That's
Apparently I'm not doing a good job.
No,
but
I think I
tailing on
got
to what
thrown
you're
by the
saying.
word big deal, because big deal could mean good, it can mean bad, and so that's where I got
No,
lost.
I'm saying it's just a big deal. It is just, it's important.
Yeah, because I mean,
co-parenting.
sometimes divorce is a good thing for some
And
families.
it may be in this case.
Yeah, and if they can co-parent and they can divorce
Yeah.
and they can each go their separate ways, sometimes that's great.
That is. Yep. It can always be better. So, all right. We are going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we are going to answer a question about being new to therapy. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
That's the wrong button.
Today's episode is brought to you by Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Carolyn Albert, Kevin Chamberlain, Ben Stanley, Byler T, and University Jeff. If you would like to sponsor the show, become a therapy producer at patreon.com/therapy. Our second AP question is: after a lengthy interview, Dr. Richard decides that the preferred treatment for Maurice is systematic desensitization. Which of the following is Dr. Richard's most likely diagnosis of Maurice?
Okay.
Is it A, conversion disorder, B, obsessive compulsive disorder, C, specific phobia, D, schizophrenia, or E, generalized anxiety
Oh,
disorder?
my goodness. Wait, what were they again?
I've at least heard of all of those answers.
Okay. Dr. Richard decides that
I don't need the
preferred-
case.
Okay.
I do. Read
Oh,
it
yeah,
again.
Dr. Richard decides that the preferred treatment for Maurice is systematic desensitization.
Yeah.
Which of the following is Dr. Richard's most likely diagnosis of Maurice? Conversion disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, specific phobia, schizophrenia, or generalized anxiety
Oh,
disorder?
gosh.
All
I
right.
don't know.
I think it's got to be specific phobia. Is that C?
Yes.
systematic desensitization.
I think it's got to be that. Because it seems to me that if it's any of the others, that treatment sounds dangerous.
Oh, man. This is okay.
Like if it is schizophrenia, that sounds
Like a bad idea.
horrible.
Okay.
What was the first option?
Conversion disorder.
Conversion disorder.
Conversion disorder. I don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah.
It's like when you've got one of those pickups where you can take, like the Chevy Avalanche, where you can you put the
Yeah,
back
you have
seat
disorder
down.
with the back seat.
yeah, and then you fold it out, and then it all opens up.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's like
But I mean,
that.
you don't want to be exposed to a piece of malfunctioning equipment.
Exactly.
So that's dangerous.
He gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, the DSM-5-TR got rid of conversion disorder. It is now called something functional disorder.
Well, the Avalanche hadn't been available in years.
that does
That's
explain
true.
why they would
they
change
stopped
that.
building that.
Yeah.
I'm also going to go with C, specific phobia, and I
That
feel
was-
pretty confident.
That was my
with it.
first thought. So my backup thoughts are either going to be conversion disorder, which is now called something functional disorder, or the other options were OCD, schizophrenia, GAD, and that was it, right?
conversion disorder, OCD, specific phobia, schizophrenia, and general anxiety
OCD
disorder.
was my number 2.
I'm stuck between conversion disorder and OCD. I don't think it's GAD. I don't think it's schizophrenia. I agree with you guys. I like specific phobia. God, I kind of feel like conversion disorder, but I'm wondering would I really... All right, I'm going to go OCD, even though technically you're supposed to use delayed reaction, but I could see you using systematic desensitization. You know what? Conversion disorder. Final answer.
All right.
Yeah, Jacob and I got it right.
Damn it!
Hey!
Specific.
Jim and I are
phobia.
tied.
And I'm 2 for 2.
You are.
Congratulations.
So, specific phobia, 81% of students got this correct.
Damn it.
And Jim got it wrong.
So
So,
tells you a lot.
Top 19%.
181st therapist, best therapist in
Yeah,
Vegas.
they don't call me that for nothing, Tangeman, because I can't even pass an AP test.
Yeah.
Whatever. Good questions, Felicia. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
those. Looking forward to doing more of those.
Oh, that's right. We have a few more weeks of those, right?
That's right.
No, just one more week.
Oh, well, there you go. Mental
right.
Health Awareness Month. If you'd like to submit trivia questions to the show, feel free. You can send it to our email, podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Just make sure that you darken out the answers so that we have to highlight them in order to see them.
Or just put them down, scroll way
Very
down the
bottom.
page or
Yeah,
something.
just put one answer to this. So
Yeah.
New to therapy. Hello, gentlemen. I have to give you credit as your podcast has given me the push I needed to finally go to a therapist.
You're welcome.
You are welcome. Thanks. That's all the time that we got for this week's session. All right. You humanized the experience and made it less scary by showing therapists are people too. And there's different kinds of approaches, and just talking to somebody can be helpful. With that said, I've gone to 3 sessions with my new therapist, and based on your advice, making myself open up and share all the thoughts I have, even though I know I feel bad saying them out loud, as I know they are mean and hurtful, especially about my current relationship. The therapist assures me he is not judging, as he doesn't have any skin in the game, but it feels so alien to say out loud to another person, as frankly, it makes me sound like a selfish a-hole, especially when he repeats back what I said. My question is, am I doing therapy right? Saying all the things I think out loud, even if they come across horrible to a professional third party? Am I working towards clarity or just treating the sessions like a bitch session? Thanks, Anonymous.
I
a
think
good
anytime you're
question.
being genuinely honest, you're doing it right. I think that's the simplest answer to that question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think with all the people I've worked with over the years. I'm trying to think of an example of a time that I was judgmental and I'm having a difficult time. I think, and that's the thing that people, I think, find it most difficult to believe when they hear a therapist say that, no, I'm not being judgmental. And everybody's like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You're lying to me. I can genuinely say I don't. I can think of maybe a time where I didn't like the way somebody reacted to something.
Okay, sure.
And it was just kind of like, I didn't like that. But I also understand, well, that's why this person is here.
Right. Yeah, you're there to work on it.
And it kind of goes back to something that Jim has said on the show before: hurting people hurt people. And understanding that okay, I've worked with some people who have done some what society would say were pretty horrific things.
Sure. Yeah.
And kind of from a therapist, having that perspective of, well, hurting people hurt people.
Right.
This is I'm not saying it's right what they did, but I can understand how that person got into that situation.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think therapists generally are sincere when they're saying that they're not being judgmental.
I think that's true. And to your question, writer, yes, you're absolutely doing it right. I think a lot of people come into therapy sort of expecting that the therapist is going to be a professor. I get that a lot. They think that we're going to lecture them, or that we're going to get out these workbooks and we're going to explain okay, here's what you have. You have this diagnosis and here's how we treat it. We do step A and step B and step C and there's a PowerPoint and we're going to teach them things. And actually, a lot of people are pleasantly surprised to discover that they end up themselves speaking the majority of the session. And I think that a lot of people find that to be actually a little bit almost scary, and feeling a little vulnerable because they think, oh my gosh, I feel like I dishonored this time. I sat there talking about me and my life. Was that a waste? Should I have not done that? Was I doing therapy right? And of course, the truth is, you did therapy exactly right. And also, that wasn't an accident. You didn't even feel like, I don't even want to give you blame for that and be like, oh, you did this. The therapist postured you into such a way that you felt comfortable opening up and explaining a lot about your life. And the therapist probably guided you with particular questions that they were curious about or areas that they wanted to see you explore. They were probably prompting you in that direction. You absolutely did therapy right. If you fill a therapy session mostly processing your own reality, you're doing therapy correctly. So absolutely, there's no shame in that. And in fact, this is progress. You're doing it right. And actually, in a moment, we're going to introduce our special guest for today. And one of the things you're going to hear as Brian Brushwood talks about his own therapy experience is exactly your question. What it was like to feel like, oh no, like you got me talking for an hour. Was I supposed to do that?
Spoiler, we've already done the interview. Sorry, everybody. Peek behind the curtain.
Peek behind the curtain. If you want to know how the sausage is made, patreon.com/therapy, and you can hear it all in its unedited format. But writer, for you, rest assured, you are doing therapy correctly. You are being genuine. You are talking. You are sharing your truth. And if you ever feel like you'd like some more feedback from the therapist, it's okay to pause and say, so anyway, I feel like I've been kind of talking for a little while. Do you have any feedback? That's a great invitation, and most therapists will receive that, and they'll receive that as you're ready for a pause and that you'd like to have some fresh thoughts from them. And we're happy to participate in that, and we'll usually give you some guidance and some thoughts to kind of coach, and then we'll probably steer you right back onto that road and try to encourage you to process a new direction and tell us more. It's not surprising to find your therapist being curious, taking a posture of curiosity and unconditional acceptance and trying to guide you, not by saying, follow me, but by kind of standing just a half step behind you and following along wherever you go. And that's part of the process. We want to do that. But don't be surprised to find that we're actually nudging you into some directions as you go. Right. So don't worry. It's not completely unguided. Even if it feels that way, as we're going to talk about with Brian, there's a lot of things that are happening in the background. So don't be afraid. You're doing it right. But great questions today, guys, as we celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month. We have got so much cool stuff to talk about this month, so much stuff that's going on. If you found us from the Reddit AMA, welcome. We're glad to have you. We hope that this will be a program you want to talk about and share with others, or just stick around and join our community. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce our special guest, and then we will jump into our interview. And then after the interview, we'll come back to wrap up the show. But our special guest today is Mr. Brian Brushwood. Brian is an amazing magician, a multiple project podcaster, an internet personality. He has huge projects on YouTube. You can find him in Scam School and also Modern Rogue, really entertaining stuff. He also has several podcasts that he's a part of. One of them is Great Night. Another one is a wonderful series called World's Greatest Con, which we talk about.
Check out World's Greatest Con.
So good.
They've already
good.
got one full season under the belt. By the time this comes out, season 2, I believe season 2 actually, as we're recording, is already all the way out.
Yep.
If you haven't listened to that before, it is worth a listen.
So good.
It's a serialized podcast. They've done 2 seasons of it now. And it's really great.
And in the interview, he introduces that project and kind of explains what it's all about, and also how personal it became for him, and which led to our interview with him and wanting to hear about his mental health. So with no further ado, we'll introduce you to Brian Brushwood. So Brian, thank you so much for being a part of this, man, all the way from, where are you at, Austin, Texas?
Austin, Texas, actually technically on the border, literally on Austin city limits. That's our street is the dividing line. So a lot of people claim that title, but we get to own it.
And
nice.
And that street, that dividing line street, looks exactly the way you think it does.
Okay, yeah.
It is a
barbed wire
2-lane street. Yep.
two Hatfields on one side, McCoys on the other, rifles in the air.
Those are different kinds of cows.
Spitting on each other.
Also, dogs that don't care. Dogs that just walk across the road. like municipalities don't mean anything.
Yeah.
Texas do be like that. I used to live in a little town outside of Dallas called Waxahachie. You ever heard of that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I've played there. Yeah.
No, shut up, man. Nobody's ever played in Waxahachie.
No, he's played cards there.
Look, Is there a college there? Then the odds. I realized I spent 20 years touring colleges, which means if you figure there's 3,000 to 5,000 colleges, I performed at 2,000 of them. That means like of all living humans in the United States, if somebody says where they went to school, there's a 1 in 3 chance I can describe their student union.
Wow.
Wow. Well, Waxahachie, Texas is a deep cut. Like that.
Oh, sure,
They're
sure.
famous for like, I don't know, catfish and being the cotton capital of the world back in like the Civil War. So
Right.
no good legacies there. But well, glad that you're coming with us, man. We're so excited to have you today. And we're just huge fans of your work. Nick and I follow everything that you do and huge fans of World's Greatest Con. Now you're in season 2, right? Now I listened to all of season 1, edge of my seat the entire time. That was amazing.
Oh shoot! So you probably know some of the heavy therapy related stuff that I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about because I laid it all out in there. As a matter of fact, we used that as kind of a hook when later on I was talking about some therapy related stuff.
Well, I won't lie to you, man.
I forgot that you dove into that on the first season of World's Greatest Con. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. As a therapist, I mean, I've sampled all of your stuff. I love all of your projects. But obviously, listening to World's Greatest Con, I mean, already I'm enthralled. It's World War II. It's amazing storyline and just this incredible world-altering con, this entire scam that's being put together by the Allies. But then you punctuate the story in this extremely personal, authentic way. And then later,
Yeah.
in Great Night, I hear you talking about how we couldn't even do 2 cuts on some of that stuff because that was it. That was my heart coming out of my chest. You heard it. That was real. And that really hit me. And I thought, man, I'd love to have him on our show.
Yeah, and if you're a real audiophile, like I suspect Jacob may have been able to tell, different takes and blending stuff together. There's some stuff that it's so authentic, even though my voice is raspy, it's early in the morning, clearly I'm distraught or whatever. The authenticity is too much to try to remanufacture later on. So we just leave it raw as is. Kind of like there's an actor whose name we weren't sure how to pronounce. So most of the episode we pronounce it one way and then later we pronounce it a different way. But for those who haven't heard, the story we cover in season 1 is Operation Mincemeat, which is now about to be released as a Netflix original movie. It was an audacious plan, originally conceived by the creator of James Bond years before any of that happened. That was eventually picked up by Montague and Chumley, a couple of people that were members of the 20 committee. It was an outrageous idea of drop a body off the coast of Spain filled with pocket litter, all of these little bits of detritus that we collect on us that sell the idea that this is a real human being who lived a real life. And we make the point in episode 1 that the job of a con man is to put all the effort into that first impression, the tableau, as we call it. And then after that, it's up to the mark to convince themselves.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of episode 2, we talk about the challenge of taking a vague idea and coming up with all the specifics. And I compared it to a video game where you have a main character who doesn't know their lines, doesn't know what they're supposed to do, doesn't know the plot of the story, but somehow has to feel like they're the ones who nailed everything. And so I talk about video games for a bit, and I talk about how I wanted to do 3D modeling and animation in the video games industry, but I didn't have the patience for that detailed work, but my brother was excellent at it. And that's why he's worked on so many games that you've heard of. And at some point in that opening vignette, spoiler alert, I start using the past tense when I refer to my brother, and I reveal that, I think we're coming up, my goodness, has it only been 8 months or so? It was in, no, it must have been a year and a half.
Yeah.
Whatever. He died, but he had been struggling with addiction and passed away. And I inherited all of his stuff, his computer. And so I would boot up his computer and poke around searching for answers. And this is as we're writing World's Greatest Con. And there was a parallel too strong for me to deny that here I am going through the digital detritus, the pocket litter of my brother's, his end point of his journey. And I realize how hungry I am for a simple answer. And of course, it's not there. Of course, it's messy and complicated and all that stuff. Unrelatedly, this is shortly before I started therapy. But I share that story, and I share the fact that that's the job of these guys in Operation Mincemeat, is to tell as compelling and as true and as complicated a narrative as I'm encountering with my brother's digital leftovers in order to sell one lie. I should probably reveal the whole plot. The whole point is to eventually get intel that looks like it's top secret, but get it in the hands of Hitler so they protect the wrong coast. But to our point, that was really the beginning of my journey with therapy and with talking things out and with I don't know, revealing myself to other people. I actually, that's not true. I reveal myself all the time, but
Prison be damned.
But to on purpose reflect upon myself, to hire a hitman whose only job is to hold a mirror up to myself and allow me to prattle on for 15 minutes asking a question, and then I realize the same trick all you dirty therapists do, which is, oh shit, you're not going to give me an answer, are you? I have to figure this shit out myself. So I'll say, well, this is happening and this is happening. So I guess my question is, and then that's the moment I realize you guys are not in the question answering business. You're in the business of just waiting patiently for me to answer my own goddamn questions. And it's already happening right now. You two fuckers ain't said one word this entire show long.
Brian, I still got to bill you for it.
See? And I'll gladly pay for it. I do a podcast for one person.
Well,
everybody's doing their jobs here. You're
That's
talking, they're listening, and I made one off-color joke.
We're
all doing our jobs.
The proportions are fantastic. But no, what you were talking about with being pro mental health, you've gone through a human story, and that podcast is amazing. If anybody out there hasn't already heard, you've definitely heard us talk about it on the show. We've gone on and on about it as we were just going through the episodes ourselves. But it's so human, not just in the storytelling, but that you wove in your personal story. And I know that for you as a professional entertainer, you do so many projects, you've got so much going on, and then to choose to be vulnerable and just naked about something so human and something that so many people relate to, especially in modern America, I just thought it was deeply profound. And even now, how you're able to kind of say, yes, I do go to therapy, and hey, don't be afraid. Like, it's okay. There's something good about that. Well, that's the whole message of the show, man. And take us into that. Take us into your story of how mental health became something you chose to focus on in your life.
It's interesting how you can be philosophically aligned with a thing and never faced with the hard decision to whether or not to go to war for it or actually participate, boots on the ground. And I think that's the way I had been for decades on mental health. Like I acknowledged early on, like, yeah, mental health really matters. Suicide seems like your life ends. It seems like we should stop that. Right. Addiction, that's bad, right? And then there comes this moment where I forget the exact moment, but there was some moment where, oh, you know what it was? It was actually, I'll try to be delicate because I don't know what the boundaries are about talking out of school about my now passed brother. But before he passed, there things were getting complicated. That's the nature of addiction, right?
Yes.
Is that you start to deal with appointments that aren't kept, dates that aren't handled. You start to have to reevaluate boundaries, and in many ways, and I'm sure this is a familiar song to you guys. All of a sudden, I'm realizing the genius of this fucking podcast. Fuck you both.
You're doing great.
Long before, in a weird way, Jay's actual death was not the hardest part. Many of the hardest parts were I began the grieving when Jay was induced into a coma for 3.5 weeks, and I had to go to Vegas to go do DEF CON and just be cool because we needed to sell some puzzle boxes and what have you.
Which was the first time that you and I really hung out a lot. And you and I end up talking about Jay going into that coma, standing in the kitchen of my old house for I think about 3 hours.
Jesus Christ!
That
Yeah.
night.
No, and I remember the surreality because that was actually a really, really funny show we did.
Right.
Because we opened with. We started off talking about the fact that I was in Hawaii, and I'm pretty sure my dad and I got solicited by a hooker, and then
Not pretty
and
sure.
then,
You definitely did.
Yeah, we definitely did. With the clever tagline of "Hello," but
How much?
But as I'm sure you guys can understand, there's sort of a numbness and the robotic nature of things. It's like have to go, have to make the funny, and my God, that alone, in the months before I ever went to a therapist, the ecstasy of being lost in laughter and maybe this is a moment that I'll turn the spotlight to Jacob, because you know the ecstasy of being lost in improvisation,
Certainly,
and being in the moment, and the world goes away. That was very, very helpful and seductive. And for a brief second, we could spend 90 minutes chatting, and then you come back to earth, and it's like, oh, that's right, my brother is slowly killing himself. So at any rate, that was when I thought it was all over, and I was struck by how many questions I had. Questions about like, did he do blank? Did he, did this lead to whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And in a weird way, forgive my, I have an addiction to metaphors. In a weird way, it was as though Jay actually passed away during that time, and all I wanted was Jay's ghost to come back and answer some questions for me. And when he came out of the coma, when you're out for that long, he was a little bit loopy and had a hard time. Eventually, went right back to his addictive behaviors. There, in a weird way, I got everything I wanted. And again, this story should not be about me, but I'm the one on the show, so it's about me for the moment. But I don't know. So that was my first time of doing therapy, and it was couples therapy because it was the simple mathematics of my wife and I literally feeling like we were out of our depth. We didn't know, like we don't have tools for what we're seeing or being a part of. We there's also the weirdness of, as a pure number of minutes of my life, I spent more time in my life being partnered with my brother than I did my own wife, and she knew that. And the weirdness that I'm sure happens to a lot of people when they're close with their siblings, and then they, fall in love with their life partner and start their own families or whatever. All of a sudden, we just realized we didn't know what's up, and we don't know how to handle this. And so we did couples therapy, even though we weren't fighting or anything. We just were like, we don't know how to deal. And then after Jay's passing, there was we started doing individual therapy because, like, as a couple, we had learned the shorthand communication. The moment we stopped doing couples therapy was when we figured out, because this therapist happened to be on the north side of town, in the 45-minute drive, as we planned out all the things we were going to talk about, we realized
the pre-therapy
by the
powwow.
time we arrived, yes,
The real therapy happens
like,
in the locker room, man.
Exactly. So we showed up and we're like,
We're good.
yeah, I think we're good.
Here's your money. Have a great night.
Can we do like a half rate on this? Or how does this work? No, I think it's...
But it's funny, and I kind of want to be the one to hold up the mirror for a change, because I'm so curious about the profession of being a therapist. Because as a magician, as somebody who is a miniature con man who sets up the tableau, I noticed little things when we went into couples therapy. For example, the fact that there was always a rolled up blanket in front of a pillow, and it was always in the middle of the couch. And I'm like, by the third time, I was like, that's not an accident. This is some kind of test. And what we would always do is we would walk up to the couch, we would take both of them, toss them aside, and then sit, thigh to thigh right by each other holding hands. And it wasn't until
front.
like the third. Yeah, no. And it wasn't like an intentional thing. It was natural for us. And then I realized, oh, this is how she resets the room every time, because if somebody's fighting, it's probably natural to set up a barrier between them and that kind of stuff. How much of that, explain to me your crazy voodoo, your black belt jujitsu of mind
Listen,
control.
man, you're the only magician giving away secrets up in this bitch. I keep to the union. All right, I don't cross lines.
much to the chagrin of other magicians.
Yeah, you make those enemies, Brian. I'm good. I'm not trying to piss off a bunch of shrinks.
Well, do you do anything special with your office?
Well, no, okay, so not to take it from Brian for too long, but I appreciate you recognizing that there is a lot to it. And actually,
There's a lot of pillow setting up and a lot of blanket placement.
everything in a therapist's office is intentionally and strategically placed. It's not for feng shui. It's for everything we can do to control the environment, from color to objects to comfort to placement of furniture to where we are located in the room, to make you feel safe. Like female therapists, for instance, will almost always place themselves close to the door. And that's also for their safety. Male therapists, which are only 25% of the field, we often put the patient closer to the door so that they feel safer with us. Being, a man alone, sometimes a female will feel safer there too. So there's so much strategy just to making sure that humans can be human. But you realize in that process that just getting a human being to sit down, to be able to drop their guard, and to access their own truth, a lot of work goes into doing kind of nothing. It takes a lot to hit that note.
I'm only saying this because you've admitted to listening to the show, but that is one of the things we talk about in World's Greatest Con, is all of the effort in that first impression, because your goal, your success condition, your con, as it were, is to have that first impression be of comfort and safety and all I want. Am I a bad person because all I want to hear is horror stories of therapy sessions?
Yeah, not
gone
for free,
bad?
Brian. You're gonna have to listen to the show. But you know what's funny? We've talked to several magicians. Obviously, being Vegas shrinks, we get to know all the fun guys and we get to talk shop with them. But we've talked about this with Matt and with RJ and other magicians. But there is a similarity between being a therapist and being a magician, except the difference is everybody's really interested in magicians telling us how they fooled us. How did you create the sensation of awe and wonder that I showed up to see? And if you're really good at it, I didn't notice you doing it. If you're really, really good at it, you made it look so simple and so natural that I was fooled from the start and I had a great time. And then afterward, I'm thrilled to hear how you did that. That only entertains me further. But in therapy, if we sit you down and explain all that we did to make it look really simple, but to help you achieve something meaningful, it actually robs you of the meaning, because now you're overthinking it.
Game recognized game. This is the same speech that magicians give. We're not keeping secrets from you. We're keeping secrets for you.
Right.
It's still garbage. Now, Dish, give me one secret. That's all I want. Just give me one trick.
Behind the desk or in front of the desk when you're talking to a patient? And
oh
why?
my God! Yeah, one feels like you're about to get an A.
Uh-huh.
The other one feels like
No desk.
you're about to get fired.
Yeah, no desk.
Nick, desk or no desk?
Well,
switch
I
back and
always
forth.
had my desk up against a wall.
Yep.
So if I was sitting at my desk, my back would be to the desk.
Yep.
Oh, which is
So
even
it'd
more
be-
of a power move.
Well, I don't know if it's a power move, but
no object. We don't
Yeah,
want an object
there's
between
not-
us and the patient.
nothing really there.
Because we
but-
want to use an open posture.
I mean, I wouldn't say there's necessarily any tricks.
Oh, there are.
Well, I don't know. I don't call
I'll
it.
answer the question. I mean, I think
no,
that there's
I'm
tons
not
of them.
avoiding the question. I just
Okay.
you and I think differently. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see this.
All right.
I don't see anything that I do. I'll speak for myself. I don't see anything that I do that is really all that amazing. I think the majority of all of my work has really been spent on learning how to ask a question. And to me, that's 90% of everything I do, is just like, if I can ask one question 5 different ways and get 5 different responses. So it's being able to understand who I'm working with, and to be able to word a question in a way that drives them in a certain direction to kind of get them on a path towards answering the question, but also towards self-discovery, as you mentioned earlier.
Okay. This is wonderful because it is astonishingly close to what I advise. We have a team of folks here, and occasionally I need something done, and I'll say, hey, call the so-and-so queue. They're going to try to trick you into not going along with it, but you have to understand this is a human being who is paid for 8 hours to sit there and deal with people who are angry at a system, but taking out their anger on the person. So what they're going to want to do is get to the next call. So you must never ask a yes/no question. Instead, you must, as fast as possible, hand them your problem and put them in your shoes. You must say, hello, so-and-so, or hello, Jim. May I call you Jim? Great. I'm Brian. You're a human. I'm a human. Do you have 30 seconds? Because I need a hero, and you're the only person I know of who can help me in this situation. What are they going to do? Say no? So it's like, great. Well, I had a cable modem service, and it was supposed to work, and we were supposed to do a podcast, but now it's not working. And then you, as magicians say, you close all the doors. I already rebooted the router. I already did the so-and-so. You've come out 5 times to correct all this. It's now been 6 months. I am now at my wit's end and about to cut off service. And then I don't ask for help. I don't ask if I can. I say, imagine you're where I am. What would you do? And then if they say, well, I wouldn't have done that, then I would say, then you have a clear answer. It's like, it sounds like you can't help me. Can you escalate me? And then, but that avoiding a yes/no question seems to be integral for getting somebody to paint an accurate picture for you as a therapist.
Yeah. Another thing we'll do is we'll make statements that we know are not correct, and we'll let you fix that because that causes you to expound and teach us more about you. You know, so if I said something like, so Brian, professional magician, what's that like? You'd feel compelled to say, yeah, they're okay. I also that, but I do a lot of other things, and you teach us more about you in that entire process.
Is there, so in that particular question, I would be tempted to go into Showtime mode, and do you have to? Maybe I'm projecting, maybe I'm making this up, but I would imagine there are times that you need to break somebody from performance mode.
Yeah.
If I started to say, well, it's not all it's cracked up to be, that's for sure. Here's a prepackaged line I have for that, and another thing. And the wife says, like, if you could tell somebody's running material on you, is it common, or am I making this up?
No, because they get paid by the hour, so they just let you go.
So actually,
it's better than Patreon.
There you go. Exactly. No, you're bringing
all
up
of your shikala.
That's right. Do it all. You're bringing up something that I actually did really want to ask you about. To bring it back to you for a second. So you talk for a living. You're an entertainer. You've been an entertainer for so long. You've visited, as you were saying, 1/3 of the colleges and universities in America. You have spoken to God only knows how many human ears. And then when you're sitting in this therapy room, you're talking to one person. And you jokingly said this, but it's like a podcast for one person. What is it like for you when you first started that and you started doing those one-on-ones to transition from this inherent ability to do showmanship that you've also woven vulnerability and genuineness into, so your showmanship comes off as very vulnerable and very real, and I think that's very magnetic, but did you have to discover a different voice that was your voice, just talking to this one person?
And I wish I could say it came from a place of a deep sense of responsibility or whatnot, but truthfully, it boiled down to, wait, I'm paying this dude, not the other way around. Right. And if I'm going to get anything out of this, I need to not, I'm not going to pay this guy to do my barrier reflexive responses to everything. Now, that doesn't mean that he shouldn't know about them. So maybe there's a question, he'll ask, what's going on? That's usually the first thing he says. Hey, Brian, what's going on? And I'm always slightly disappointed that he's not more excited to see me. But again, it's not his job to be excited to see me. It's his job to get me to reflect upon myself. And so I fill that void of disappointment with beginning to tell him about stuff. And oftentimes, much like a podcast, I will begin with a called shot. and I'll say, look, I'm going to brag for about 20 minutes on this one thing. Then I'm going to ask you a question. And then the last 20 minutes, I don't know how to handle this situation. And then I do my victory lap, because if I'm paying this dude, he can't not listen to me talk about how great our public event was. And I was like, and then this happened, and I got really confused because of the one hand, the butt, or whatever. Now, here's my checkmate move, because I don't know how often you get reports from the front lines. My checkmate move is, now it seems to me like I have the one choice and the other. And what I really want to know is, as a therapist, what are best practices to expect in this situation?
He's cracked the code.
Oh, Jim and Nick are giving me the shut-off signal. They're giving me the cut
Cut him off, man. Cut him off.
See the Matrix.
Delete the episode. Burn it. Burn it all.
Well, and not that I rely upon that, but significantly, and I'll dish a little bit here. There was a moment. My brother passed away in November. It was on election day. I sometimes stumble across that weird nugget of, my brother died not knowing who won the election. And then around May, I believe, I realized, it was Mother's Day, as a matter of fact. And I was sharing the story of a family get-together and how pleasant it was. And the way I phrased it for my therapist was, yeah, we did this, we did that, we did the other thing. And it wasn't until the very end that I realized, for the first time in maybe 5 years, my brother's ghost was not in attendance. Because even when he was alive, he wasn't, his ghost, if he was physically there, then we were looking at the difficulty he was struggling with at the time. If he wasn't there, we were all thinking about the difficulty that he was dealing with at the time. And so I shared that, and I realized that he was just going to nod like you guys are. And then I said, hey, at that therapy school that you take to become a therapist, what do they teach you is about the time that, because I just realized my brother passed like 6 months ago. About when should I start feeling this way? Do they teach you? And he had that look of, and maybe it was a manufactured look, in which case kudos to him. But he kind of nodded. And smiled. It was like, yeah, about 6 months. I don't know if that's true or not, but it felt good at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, got some validation there. But it sounds like you have a good rapport with your therapist. Did you?
You turned on therapy talk.
Stop psychoanalyzing me, Brian. But did you pick your therapist, or was that the same person you had done couples work with, or did you go try a few before you found a good fit?
It was a different person. I've not really talked about this in public at all. And maybe I would prefer to anybody listening that this not be a hot news item, but I guess I will share, in the interests of destigmatizing mental health, that I went to an audiologist because my wife and I went on a trip, and she was feeling like we weren't connecting, and she suggested I get my hearing checked or whatever. And my hearing was fine. And the weirdest thing happened. My audiologist suggested, have you considered having yourself screened for ADD? And I was like, what? That's weird. Okay. And he says, well, more often than you would expect, people come in and they're having difficulty communicating, and it has nothing to do with the biology of their ears. It has to do with their ability to maintain focus and on their partner. And so he gave us a list of what were called golden rules of communication, which I thought was very helpful and good.
The audiologist gave this to you?
Yes.
Wow, that's
yeah.
fascinating right
like,
there.
I know. That's what I was thinking too.
Well, and think about it. The way we phrase our questions, like, for example, this happens with my daughters all the time. They're teenagers, so they mumble a lot, right? So it's like, "Hey, Dad, do you know where the?" or they'll start with a mumble. It's like I was at the, and I want to know where it's at. And I'll say, I'll say what, And they said, I want to know where it's at. And I'm like, no, I heard that part. So I have learned, per the golden rules of communication, that what I should do is say, I heard you want to know what it's at. What is it? And then they will oftentimes give a more helpful response.
Immediately following the eye roll.
Yes, correct. But again, look, I knew what I was up to when I was having sex with the lady. So I did. I did one of those self-assessment ADD thingies, and this very bizarre possibility occurred to me that what if the joke, literally the joke I had heard my entire life, ever since in the early 90s, ADD was it showed up in a lot of articles, and everybody thought it was funny to make ADD jokes about Brian. What if it was true? And the whole reason I quit my day job a year and a half into being in a cubicle and sought a life as an adventure-seeking, touring magician was really just an excuse to chop my life up into discrete 6-hour chunks, where every 6 hours there was an emergency that required all of my attention. If I'm on stage, I need to be setting up for the show. If I'm performing, I need to wrap this up and then start signing autographs. If I'm at the hotel, it's because I have 4 hours to sleep. If I'm awake in a hotel room, it's because I have to get to the airport to go to the next place. If I'm at a convention, and so on. So I'm about 3 years, I think, 3.5 years into exploring my journey of actually working with a psychiatrist on this stuff. And the moment that it took for me to realize it is, man, when you're on the road, there's nothing like the bliss, the ecstasy of at every single moment all day, knowing that you're doing the one thing you're supposed to be doing.
That's true.
When you're on a plane, you're not supposed to be doing your taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And whereas once we started doing media, from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to bed, I'm almost certain there's something more important I ought to be doing. And that was hard. And I found myself engaging in avoidance tactics like playing Hearthstone and so on. But at any rate, so it's hard to say out loud, but I guess I have ADD. That's a thing.
It is a thing.
Wow.
And you're
That's
absolutely
fascinating.
right that I think especially this generation, we went through a time when it was being overdiagnosed, and then that became a punchline. So then they stopped diagnosing it. And then a bunch of people just floated right through the system, and they were just told, kid's a little rambunctious, they're especially the funny kids. A lot of the funny kids growing up just got to, that one's just a class clown, blah, blah, blah. And then, you come up of age and you realize, no, this is a pattern. It's fine. It's a normal part of the human spectrum, but it requires self-awareness so that you can adapt a little bit. Have you found any successful skills that have helped you kind of adjust into the media part of your career, knowing that you have sort of that mind that wants to chase a million things in a million directions?
Well, the biggest thing for me has been to acknowledge the reason stuff is happening. Like, if I find somebody boring, I think to myself, they're not boring. You are bored because you're ADD. And it gives me a little bit of, enthusiasm to double down on staying focused and so on, and understand that there was a moment when I was, I think 3 or 4 years old, and I was not aware that other human beings could see where my eyes were pointed. And my mom was lecturing me on something, and I was very bored by the lecture. So I made a game of making rainbows with my eyes back and forth.
And then she tried to do an exorcism, and she pulls out.
And then she just
The
punched you
power
right
of
in the
Christ
mouth.
compels you.
No, I mean, there was like a no shit moment where my mom was like, I can see your eyes. And what? And the way she tells it today, like it was like the horror of realizing that God was real.
Lost
I
my
mean, that
innocence.
is one more thing on the list that I'm going to add to my list of why I want to hang out with your parents more.
Tell me about the day that Brian achieved self-consciousness.
Now then,
Yeah, I guess that was it.
now then, swinging back just a little bit, because Brian and my professional paths are weirdly parallel. His is on stage and mine is off stage. But in a lot of ways, Brian and I have an oddly parallel career path over the years. And because I have often thought about myself, thinking that I am probably somewhere on that spectrum of ADD. And I've always been secretly terrified of fixing it, for lack of a better word, because a little bit of that, again, lack of a better word, flightiness, and a little bit of manic in there as well,
Is your superpower.
absolutely allows me to do 28 things at the same time.
Correct.
And now, did you have
for
concerns
example,
about that?
I did, and to be honest, man, you want to talk about flow state energy? When you are on stage, and let me make it more relatable. There's nothing I love more than exercising on a bicycle or a stationary bike while listening to a narrative or nonfiction audiobook while playing Hearthstone.
Wow.
Because my body is fully engaged in the simple exercise of keep moving,
Repetitive,
keep riding the bike.
thoughtless
That's easy.
motion.
Exactly. My narrative, my linguistic part of my brain, and this is something that Dr. Richard Feynman talked about, is that he noticed that he could think of math things while also listening to language things, but he couldn't do two language things at the same time, couldn't do two math things at the same time. And what's really interesting is I'll be listening to a nonfiction book or a podcast, and then in general, Hearthstone is a card game. It's like Magic the Gathering, if you're not familiar. But it becomes symbolic. You stop needing to read anything. You know this is the fireball that will kill this guy that does this thing or whatever. But every so often, a complicated picture a chess problem, basically. All of a sudden, the problem will get interesting enough that I realize I really have to think it through. And then it's like, it's pause the audiobook and then give full attention to this. It's similar with magic on stage. You have the animalistic excitement of performing in front of people, the approval of their laughter and applause, all that stuff. You're saying the script that you've said 1,000 times before, but really you're thinking about how your right foot is about 3 inches too far to the left, and it's going to take you 4 steps instead of 3 to go pick up that props. And out of the corner of your eye, you're keeping an eye on that one dude who's whispering to the other guy, because you need to evaluate whether or not he's about to start heckling you or whether or not he's so excited about the trick that he would be a good volunteer for that routine 2 tricks from now.
Wow.
That is ecstasy for me.
Yeah.
And I don't get that much nowadays. You still get that every night with all of the production stuff, right?
I mean, a fair
Jacob?
amount, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on, but even with that, I can sit there and I've got 8 different things happening at the same time. Not at the same time, but I've got 3 different things happening at the same time, and I've got 6 more things that are right on the tail that I know I'm figuring out how is this going to affect this thing that's coming up, and how is this other thing going to affect this thing coming up. But it's not exactly the same, because it's still with that the nice thing and the bad thing about that is it is much more linear than what you're talking about. I'm just thinking about all of the flow chart of things. How is this going to affect this thing that's down the road, which is also going to affect this thing down the road, and then there's this other thing that happened earlier that's also going to affect this thing that's coming up next that nobody else is really aware of yet, but they're about to be aware of it right now, so I have to be ready for them to get aware of it and tell them, no, it's fine, I've already fixed it.
I guess also you have I don't know if I'm overstating this, you tell me, but the advantage position of you get to position yourself emotionally as the guy who reacts to the input he's fed.
Absolutely.
At very few points do you have to make a very important narrative decision. You get to react to the person on stage who's making the narrative decision.
The only time
accurate?
The only time that I make a real narrative decision is if there is a true, honest to God emergency.
Right.
If someone is
At
injured,
which point
or
you
if there
become the
is-
voice of God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only time that happens. And even that's not really a narrative decision. I'm just letting everyone else know what's going to happen. I just happen to be the one who knows what's going to happen. So like if someone falls and cracks their head open, I know what it is that I'm going to say, and everyone else knows what it is that I'm going to say, and everyone else understands, like, no, we're going to do step A, we're going to do step B, we're going to do step C, and I just might be the first one to say it.
So, Jim and Nick, how much of what Jacob and I are describing is flow state? Is just being in the groove and is super common? Like, am I chasing that high? Am I mistaken by associating that with the diagnosis of ADD or anything?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's adjacent to it. A lot of people describe it. This is why we don't always like to use terms like mental illness to describe some of these stuff. We might just say that's neurodivergent, right? It's just a different way to do things.
A mental state.
It's just a state. So we've got folks that are on autism spectrum, and they'll tell you, like, actually, in many ways, this is my superpower. And there's aspects of this that perhaps make me quirky in social circles, or perhaps, make me identifiable. But then there's aspects of this that honestly become so integral to who I am. For me, I live with chronic anxiety. And these guys have seen it up close and personal. It's not fun.
Today.
But yeah, today. On the way here, actually, twice. But, it's nice because in many ways, it makes me, and I'm being honest, a better therapist because I'm constantly in hyperdrive, overthinking every detail the person I'm thinking about and working with and worrying about all the things that could go wrong while trying to stay calm. And so I've thought 10 thoughts instead of one. And then if you do that long enough, like your flow state, I think as a therapist in my profession, I too will have that sense of like, I've got this. I'm definitely steering this where I want it to go. The rhythm is right. The procedure is right. I can see where I want this session to be in 25 minutes. And I think I see the path of how to get that person there. And I'm excited for it. I think there's value. But I don't think that's all training. I think some of that is Jim's neurotic bingo of like, just going through all of my neuroses and using them to my advantage. But I think that's a really common thing. A lot of people probably relate to that.
Yeah, I would say so.
Has there been a moment for either of you two where you have perceived that you've bounced up against like, oh, this is not the realm of therapy, this is the realm of neuroscience, and this is where I need to
Refer out?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that happens all
I
the
think
time.
that's very common. But I think, the other part of it, too, is there's a lot of times where, I've been working with individuals who will express a concern about something and like, well, is this diagnosis, or is this normal, or is this other thing over here? And I guess for me, it always comes back to, is it a problem?
Right.
Because if it's
Right.
like, is it maladaptive? Is it causing a significant amount of distress? Is it something that's impairing your ability to function in life? Or is it just something that, like, this is just how I do it? Like, Jim mentioned diversity. Yeah. So
neurodivergence.
Divergence. Yeah. So, is it just kind of different? If you found a way to function with it and it works for you, then I tend not to explore it all that deep.
Yeah, we don't have to pathologize it.
Yeah, unless it's really a problem.
Yeah.
If the person thinks it's a problem, then it's a problem.
Usually
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
I just now realized that I never got around to answering your original question as to how I found my therapist.
Well,
I just
it started
found
with your
somebody
dad
who,
and you were walking on a beach and she approached you, right?
Yeah, if you were wondering about that
Somebody
ADD
said
thing, we don't do a lot of diagnosis on this show. So after we finish, we'll talk.
No, but in that case, it was the ADD being a relatively new diagnosis. Was I looked for somebody who specialized in ADD and anxiety because those are two beasts that I wrestle with, and So that's your answer.
So this big picture, it's Mental Health Awareness Month as we're publishing this. And that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about that big picture of, hey, even entertainers, even people that you see and you hear and you love their content, they're pro mental health. It's okay to get help, and it can change their lives and be a really positive thing. And every human being's life is often touched by mental health, whether it's us or it's a family member. And so far, I think your story is very inspiring, and I think your honesty and even your self-revelation of what you've gone through and how it's benefited your life. But one of the things we always try to kind of circle around to as kind of a big message for the month is giving the guest an opportunity to send that kind of encouraging word to anybody listening. You know, the person out there that might be thinking, oh, you know, seeing a shrink is for pussies. You know, I don't do that. My old man and me, we rubbed, some dirt on it and you don't talk about it. Or the person out there that says, oh, you know, what would I even talk about? How would I know if I even need any help? Or the person that just feels like ashamed of it. Like, well, I don't want to go there and be labeled and be told that I, have some kind of mental illness and now I carry this around with me. People are going to think differently. Or my coworkers, what if they find out? Or my spouse, what if they find out? There's a lot of folks that are really, really afraid of therapists. Not all are so brave as you, Brian, to sit down on a podcast with them, but I want to see if maybe you have an encouraging word in you for the general folks out there that might be thinking about getting help.
Whatever label it is that you fear, almost certainly, if you tell your loved ones or people you know that, let's say it gets confirmed, nobody will be surprised. I guarantee you, nobody who knows who I am is surprised that for the first time ever on a podcast, I talked about having ADD. Nobody is surprised.
I mean,
full stop.
Brian and I have known each other for, 6 years-ish
Yeah.
now?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
you said that we've never had this conversation before. You said that.
You didn't.
I sat
didn't
calmly
need to.
in my chair.
Yeah. Brian, Brian, I haven't known you for very long, but this is the most ADD I've ever seen.
Well, no, and I was going to say earlier, I want to wrap around to something that you said much earlier when you were talking about your brother and how you didn't want to make it about you. And I think that's important sometimes to make it about you. It's something that we don't do on this show so much because so many times on this show we're talking about the person who is doing the action, either the addiction or possibly the contemplating suicide or something of that nature, and we brush past it every so often, but we don't talk about the effect that it has on the friends and the family as often as we probably should, because I mean that there is a really big effect on that, and this is just me talking now, but I mean there is a really big effect on people who are directly related to that person, and that means something to the person oftentimes as well.
Well, and I certainly have found that being adjacent to my brother's challenges with addictions, that it has me fully dialed in. Like, I asked myself, this might be a bit perverse, especially in a public environment or whatever, but I honestly was asking, hey, all things being equal, if my brother had straight up said, yes, I will die 7 years earlier, but I will enjoy this fine whiskey or whatever, would that have bothered me? Honestly, no. But what did bother me was his inability to be consistent in calling or showing up, or it's really it was the broken promises. It's
Right.
those peripheral effects. It's the forcing other humans to, like, I've become allergic to the words "I'll try to be there." It's like it's this visceral kind of gross reaction that I feel because "I'll try to be there" is code for I definitely will not be there, and so on.
Right.
Yeah. So, but in terms of wow, I got so lost in the moment, I forgot the question.
That's their plan.
Yeah,
That was your
that's how they get you.
But no, Jacob brings up a good point, which is that a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have this problem, so I don't need to talk to a therapist.
Right.
But if you're in the human ecosystem of those who are dealing with things, you, a human being, are affected by those things. And I'm so glad that you told the story of you and your wife as family members, part of a constellation that was as a team dealing with this problem and going for that help for yourselves, not just to get a list of do's and don'ts, which I'm sure you asked. Everybody sits down with a therapist and says, oh, what should we do when they do this? And how should we pursue this? And everybody does that. That's okay. But probably throughout that process, you started to reveal how this had affected you and your own personal pain and your own personal resentments and your own personal fears and the suffering that you're going through. It's a very human experience. There doesn't always have to be a label for it, and it's okay to get help anytime you feel like you need to.
No.
There is this kind of wonderful moment in my. What's funny is I could tell therapy was going well when it was every week, and then I said like, okay, and we got to the end of the session. He's like, so maybe 2 weeks from now. And I was like, that's the kind of thing you say when somebody is on the right track. But there's this moment when, even as we're talking, I'll find myself saying, oh my God, I just realized I'm seeking your validation and you're not in the validation business. Only validation can come with me. And you know what? I do give myself permission to do this. I do believe it's going to be this barrier, this deadline, and this. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be prepared with blank, blank, and blank. Thank you, me.
And then they pop out their headphones. They go, what? I heard something about me. Thank you, me. What was the rest of that? But no, you're absolutely right. If a therapist is doing the job well, and this kind of alludes back or calls back to what we were talking about earlier with magicians, if we're doing it really well, you're not sure we did anything at all. We allowed you to find your
you're quoting Futurama, and we both know it.
It's part of my God complex. It's just there. But there's a truth to it. If you're subtle at it and you're good at it, something wonderful happens. And that's all thanks to the therapeutic process. But that is also coming out of the human who showed up, willing to do it, is vulnerable, is talking through it.
All of a sudden, I really want to see like an indie movie about a therapist who has healthy clients, but he needs the money. And so
he's like damaging them.
You want there to be a therapy version of Misery.
he's trying to like gaslight them. And you're like, I don't know, seems like she might be cheating on you. What do I know though? I'm just a therapist.
Is this water gin? What? Does it taste like gin?
Why do you think that? That's weird. Anyway, my rates have gone up slightly.
I couldn't possibly.
It's just gaslighting him the whole time. Why did you say that? I didn't say anything. Wow, you didn't even hear yourself, huh? And then shake your head. Draw pictures on your pad.
I do have, it's not mine to plug, but there's a project, and if you have time to squeeze it in, if you're, Jacob, you're probably familiar with the magicians Barry and Stewart over in England. Barry Jones reached out to me. He's got a graphic novel that he has been working on for a long time about depersonalization disorder, which I believe in his Kickstarter, he mentions that he himself suffers from and was trying to put put words to.
Wow.
It is wonderful. I've read the entire thing. He has a Kickstarter up. If you just search for, is it the Book of, let me look it up real quick. Yeah, it's the Book of Nile, Niall, on Kickstarter. It is extraordinary. He has written magic tricks into it to kind of subvert that sense of reality that we're all grounded in. It is utterly delightful, and it seems to come from a genuine place of wanting to communicate a very personal issue. I would highly recommend that you get him on the show. He's fantastic.
very
people.
cool.
That
Excellent.
sounds awesome.
Thank you.
So if people want to find your work, we've plugged the World's Greatest Con. How do they find that? And if they want to find more of your stuff, how do they track it down?
Wherever you get your podcasts, just type in World's Greatest Con. If you'll see my mug looking kind of half judgingly at you over
Yeah, that
a
was
shot
very
of whiskey.
PI. It's got like the blinds in the background with like a silhouette. It's like, this is very private investigator.
Fun fact, that's definitely a television with a football game in the background that we photoshopped. And that was an intentional decision because we knew that it was going to make it harder to make it a successful podcast. But as you have heard, the story is not, this is not just straight up the history of these various things. It is also, the Brian story of these things. But along with that, of course, Modern Rogue is on YouTube. We're on a quest to become the ultimate gentleman, warrior, and scoundrel. I teach magic tricks with used to be at bars until bars shut down, and then now it's me teaching my daughter and other folks at Scam School, and of course, Great Night Podcast, and occasionally I show up on Ice Cream Social.
Yeah. Well, man, we're looking forward to getting to hang with you for Scoop Fest. As people are listening to this, it will have happened in the past, but that's going to be fun. It's going to be a good swanky time. And if you need any co-conspirators to pull off any pranks on Jacob, we're your guys. We're in deep.
Look, I'm more interested to find out how to cheat in your trivia showdown.
I'm sure we could find those answers.
I'll tell you right now, you do not want to use Jim for any of it.
Hey!
That's true. That is true.
Jim has more tells than a bank teller. I mean, Jim just, you know what he's doing 10 minutes before he does.
I am a man of mystery, sir. How dare you?
It's a mystery how you dress yourself.
Brian, thank you so much, man. Thank you for all that you do. I mean, being out there, just being a voice that advocates for mental health generally, and for taking the time to hang out with a bunch of dummies like us and tell your story and just keeping it honest. We really appreciate you, man. We need more voices like yours, normalizing mental health, making it okay for people to be unafraid to get help, to hear somebody else's role modelship and say, yeah, that guy did it. Maybe I'll get help too. It really can save lives, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Heck yeah.
So thanks so much to Brian Brushwood for being a part of this. Man, Mental Health Awareness Month is off to a great start, and we want to welcome and thank all of you who have now joined us. Maybe you found us through the Reddit AMA. We hope that you'll stick around and be a part of our show going forward and enjoy the fact that we have a wonderful community of people that love mental health and love supporting each other, and we'd like to invite you to join that community. You can find us on all the socials, but you can also join the community at patreon.com/therapy. That's where folks go to donate to the show and join the club. And basically, we use all that money to finance the show, make the project possible, do stuff for mental health. And what folks get access to on our Patreon is every single episode. They get an extended cut of the show. They get a whole additional hour of content, which is really more that casual behind-the-scenes piece, unedited, where we're just talking about life. It's usually really funny, more laid back, very relaxed. And then they also get access to all sorts of additional content where we do deep dive topics like what are the changes in the DSM-5 TR if you're ever so curious, or how do we treat narcissistic personality disorder? We lay that out step by step and tell you all about that. What is ADHD and how do we diagnose for it? What is major depressive disorder? What is seasonal affective disorder? All of these and many more are outlined inside of our Patreon, as well as fun, spontaneous side projects. We've done several partial book clubs. We've never quite finished one. We've done psychology movie nights where we've watched some really funny, great psycho comedies where we've talked about them and kind of analyzed them and made our own jokes as we go along. So a great and supportive community can be found at patreon.com/therapy, and you'll also have access to our show's Discord, where you can actually chat with us throughout the week and get to know other listeners and be a part of the community. Now, as we record this episode, we always, at the end of every show, we thank anybody who has become a patron of our show at any of the levels, and those who are our theropods, we thank all of them and higher every month, and we thank our theraproducers every show. That's who you heard us thanking during the commercial breaks and at the end of every show. So now that you know the formula, we have a new therapal. Nick, who is it?
Sherry Hare. Welcome.
I love that name. Sherry Hare. Totally works. And of course, this is the
It's her real
first.
name.
That probably feels
why are you
right.
being an asshole?
That's not a real name. No way that's a real name. Doesn't that feel like that's a fake name? That's an alias.
I feel like that's a real name.
There's no way. It's the first week of the month. So the first week of the month, we always thank all of those who patron the show at the Theropod level and higher. So we want to thank you guys, the Theropods. Thank you, Kate Keller, Scoopstronaut, Corey Owens, Linda Brandmeier, Lori Eltzroth, Brad Kiefover, Christine Phillips, Joseph Pengrazio, Tracy Replogle, Gavin Bristow, Carrie Terhark, Stacy Westerland, Richard Bruins, Scoopy Jess, Ian Whitefall, Chelsea Saracen, Craig Little, Curtis Kiwi Scoop Hanlon, James K, Katie Chiwakowski, Don Dorr, Jim Hunter, Adam Rabiznik, Brooks Lyle, Okie Scoop, Matt Nayer, Three Scoops a Lady, Todd Canfield, David Sorensen, Felicia Butler, hey, thanks for the trivia, by the way, Shayla Bullock, Scoopatron, Lauren Izzo, Stacy Coleman, I Have the Knack, Adam Pettinuzzo, LB Shreve, Mats Lenegren, Polygon, Scoop, in a stupid-ass way, Take It Evie Podcast, Sustainable Transportation for All, Ulrika, Ian Soto, Jessica Cyphers, Andrew Langmead, Charlie Quinn Starling, Natalie MC, Kernapillar, Dr. Scoop Little, Mama Ninja Scoop, James Dawson, Colson Morrow, Jacob Harrington, Sean Daughtry, Amanda H., Grumpy Lakemead Park Ranger, Sarah Olo, John Hanfelder, Kiana, Sam Buck, Megan Smith, Musa, Scoopnado Bait, Kate with an I, Chris the Scoopless, What Weekend, Michael Madinat, Some Nobody, Ethan Levine, Leela, Ginger G, Lovely Spark, Nippy, Adam, Aisling, Cartwright, and Alec Lancaster.
And we got a new pterodactyl. Welcome to the flock, Myra. And thank you to all of our pterodactyls, including Ice Blue Scoop, Brian Lehman, Scott Brady, Fred Bashara Jr., Andrea Anderson, Lindsay Bashara, Robert Polson, Tess Miller, Slurpee Kaye Motherfucker, Frozen Cusser, Angie Ellis, Ryan Stewart, Scott Ashlock, Robert Ward, Chris, Sandra McWaffle, Cy Shenonigan, Not a Scoop Solo Cody, Stephen L. Proctor, TKO, Dank Butter, and Myra.
And of course, we want to thank our bosses, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Theraproducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, King of Student Loan Debt, Dr. Ben Don, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Kevin Chamberlain, Malia, Richard Macy, Cindy Ash, Newstick, Lord Colin Stewart, Dirty B, Ben Stanley, Sammy Scoop, Sarah Smith, Adam Hathaway, Dan Martin, Byler T, and University Jeff.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited,
And why wouldn't you?
and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health.
That is all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Matt and Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast. And thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you have to keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link we provided in your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and Instagram at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangent.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Pick it, why, pick it, why, pick it,
Why didn't you guys tell me that you couldn't hear the music the first